The woman behind the counter at the Department of Motor Vehicles thought she'd seen it all. 23 years of processing licenses, registrations, and identification cards. 23 years of impatient customers, fake smiles, and the endless hum of fluorescent lights overhead. But on that Tuesday morning in October 2023, when a young man walked up to her window in a small Ohio town, she had no idea she was about to crack open a case that had haunted an entire state for 17 years. The man was 26 years old, polite, nervous. He handed over his documents with shaking hands. She typed his information into the database, and that's when everything stopped. The name didn't match. The birth date triggered every alarm in the system. And in the next 72 hours, this routine transaction would answer a question that had destroyed families, ended careers, and left a community asking one terrible question for nearly 2 decades. What happened to Daniel Brooks? Before we dive deep into one of the most shocking missing persons cases ever solved, I need you to do 3 things right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like icon, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Your support keeps these incredible true stories alive, and I read every single comment. Do it now, I'll wait. Let me take you back. Back to 2006, back to a small town in Ohio called Riverside, population just under 12,000. The kind of place where high school football games were the biggest events of the week, where everyone knew their neighbors by name, where children rode their bikes to school and parents didn't think twice about it. This was middle America, safe, predictable, boring in all the best ways. Nothing bad happened here. Nothing bad could happen here. Daniel Brooks was 9 years old in the spring of 2006. He lived on Elmwood Avenue with his mother, Jennifer Brooks, and his 6-year-old sister, Emily. His father had left when Daniel was 3, and Jennifer had raised both children on her own, working double shifts at the hospital as a nurse to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Daniel was what teachers called a good kid, quiet, well-behaved. He made decent grades, never caused trouble, and had a small circle of close friends. He loved video games, especially anything with adventure and puzzles. He collected comic books and kept them in pristine condition in plastic sleeves under his bed. He had dark brown hair that fell into his eyes, freckles across his nose, and a smile that showed his slightly crooked front teeth that Jennifer had been saving up to get fixed with braces. April 22nd, 2006, a Saturday. Jennifer had the day off from the hospital, a rare occurrence that she'd been looking forward to all week. She'd planned to take Daniel and Emily to the park, maybe get ice cream afterward, just spend some quality time with her kids. But that morning, Daniel asked if he could ride his bike to his friend Marcus's house instead. Marcus Chen lived 4 blocks away. Daniel had ridden there dozens of times before. Jennifer hesitated for just a moment, that maternal instinct that makes you want to keep your children within arm's reach at all times. But it was daytime. It was 4 blocks through a safe neighborhood. Daniel was 9, old enough to be responsible, and he'd been so good lately, doing his homework without being asked, helping with Emily, cleaning his room. Jennifer said yes. She told him to be back by 5 o'clock for dinner. She told him to be careful crossing streets. She told him she loved him. Daniel grabbed his bike from the garage, a blue BMX-style bike with black handlebar grips that he'd gotten for Christmas the year before. He waved to his mother as he pedaled down the driveway. Jennifer watched him turn the corner at the end of the street. That was the last time she ever saw her son, or at least she thought it was. 5 o'clock came and went. No Daniel. Jennifer called the Chen family. Mrs. Chen answered and told her that Daniel had never arrived. She'd assumed he'd changed his mind or that Jennifer had needed him at home for something. Jennifer felt her stomach drop. She called 3 other friends' houses. No one had seen him. She got in her car with Emily and drove Daniel's usual route to Marcus's house, searching every yard, every alley, every corner. Nothing. By 6 o'clock, she called the police. The Riverside Police Department responded immediately. This was a 9-year-old child missing in a small town. They took it seriously from minute 1. Officers flooded the neighborhood. They knocked on every door on Elmwood Avenue, on the surrounding streets, asking if anyone had seen a boy on a blue bike. Search parties formed. Neighbors who'd been making dinner or watching television suddenly found themselves walking through yards and vacant lots calling Daniel's name. Volunteers from the community showed up. The local news ran Daniel's picture on the 6 o'clock broadcast. Missing child, last seen riding his bicycle. If you have any information, please call this number. The first 48 hours of a missing child case are critical. Everyone in law enforcement knows this. The chances of finding a child alive decreased dramatically after those first 2 days. The police worked around the clock. They brought in search dogs. They dragged the river that ran along the edge of town. They searched abandoned buildings, construction sites, anywhere a child might have hidden or gotten hurt or trapped. They found nothing, not a single trace. No bicycle, no witnesses, no evidence. It was as if Daniel Brooks had simply vanished into thin air. The investigation expanded. Detectives interviewed everyone who'd ever had contact with Daniel. Teachers, coaches, parents of his friends, neighbors. They ran background checks on every registered sex offender in a 50-mile radius. They looked at Jennifer's ex-husband, Daniel's father, who lived 3 states away and hadn't seen his children in years. He had an alibi. He'd been at work that entire day with dozens of witnesses. They looked at extended family members. Nothing. Everyone checked out. Everyone had alibis. Everyone passed polygraph tests. The detectives were baffled. Children don't just disappear without leaving some kind of trail. Jennifer Brooks became the face of this tragedy. She did interview after interview with local news stations, then regional networks, then national morning shows. She held press conferences with Daniel's school photo clutched in her hands, begging whoever had taken her son to please bring him home. She offered rewards. She started a foundation. She never stopped looking. Birthdays came and went. Daniel turned 10, then 11, then 12. Every year, Jennifer held a vigil on the anniversary of his disappearance. Every year, fewer people showed up. The story faded from the headlines. Other tragedies took its place, but Jennifer never stopped believing her son was out there somewhere. The police never officially closed the case, but after 5 years with no new leads, no evidence, no sightings, the active investigation essentially stopped. Detectives moved on to other cases. The Daniel Brooks file gathered dust in the cold case archives. Most people in Riverside assumed the worst, that Daniel had been abducted by a predator, that he'd been murdered, that his body would probably never be found. It was the only explanation that made sense, except it wasn't true. Let me tell you what actually happened on April 22nd, 2006. Daniel Brooks did get on his bicycle that morning. He did intend to ride to Marcus's house, but 3 blocks from home, at the corner of Elmwood Avenue and Oak Street, a car pulled up beside him. A woman was driving. She rolled down the window and asked Daniel if he could help her. She said she was looking for a lost puppy. She had a picture, a golden retriever. She said she'd seen it run into a yard a few blocks away, but she couldn't find the house again. Would he help her look? It would only take a few minutes. Daniel hesitated. He'd been taught about stranger danger, but this wasn't a strange man in a van. This was a woman, a mom type. She looked safe. She looked worried. And Daniel loved Doss dog. His mother had always said they couldn't afford one, but he'd begged for years. He thought about how sad he'd be if his dog was lost. He said okay. He'd help for just a few minutes, then he'd go to Marcus's house. The woman asked if he wanted to put his bike in her trunk so they could drive around and look. Daniel agreed. He helped her lift his bike into the trunk of her car. He got in the passenger seat. She drove away from Elmwood Avenue. She drove out of Riverside. She drove for hours. And by the time Daniel realized something was wrong, by the time he started to cry and asked to go home, they were in a different state. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with the words, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this absolutely shocking story. The woman's name was Carol Henderson. She was 42 years old. She lived alone in a rural area of Pennsylvania, about 4 hours from Riverside, Ohio. She had no criminal record, no history of mental illness, nothing that would have put her on anyone's radar. But Carol had lost a child. Her son, Matthew, had died 3 years earlier at age 9 from leukemia. The grief had broken something fundamental inside her. She tried therapy. She tried medication. Nothing helped. Nothing filled the void. And one day while driving through Ohio visiting her sister, she'd seen a boy on a bicycle who looked just like Matthew. Same dark hair, same build, same age. And something in her brain simply snapped. Carol convinced herself that this was a sign, that the universe was giving her son back. She didn't think of it as kidnapping. In her fractured mind, she was rescuing this child. She was giving him a better life. She was completing her family again. She took Daniel to her farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. She told him his mother hadn't wanted him anymore. She told him Jennifer had asked Carol to take him because she couldn't afford to raise two children. She told him his mother had signed papers giving up custody. Daniel was 9 years old. He was terrified. He cried for days. But Carol was patient. She was kind in her own twisted way. She gave him his own room. She bought him amazing games. She homeschooled him. She told him she was his mother now. She called him Matthew. For the first year, Daniel tried to escape multiple times. But they lived on an isolated farm. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. Carol had no internet connection, no television, no phone that Daniel could access. She told him that if he tried to run away, the police would arrest him because he was legally her son now. She told him that his real mother had moved away and started a new family and didn't want him back. She showed him forged documents with Jennifer's signature. To a 10-year-old child, it looked real. It looked official. And slowly, horribly, Daniel began to believe it. Years passed. Daniel grew up in that farmhouse. Carol enrolled him in a small private school when he was 13, using forged documents that identified him as Matthew Henderson. He made friends. He went to birthday parties. He played soccer. To everyone who knew him, he was just Carol's son, a quiet kid. A little withdrawn maybe, but polite, smart. No one suspected anything. Why would they? Carol was a church-going woman, a volunteer at the local food bank. She seemed like a devoted mother raising her son alone after her husband's death, which was the story she told. But Daniel never forgot, not completely. As he got older, as he matured, doubts began to creep in, memories that didn't quite align with the story Carol had told him. He remembered his mother's face, though the details got fuzzier every year. He remembered his sister. He remembered his old house, his old friends, fragments of a life that Carol insisted was just dreams or false memories. When he was 16, he found a box in Carol's attic while looking for Christmas decorations. Inside were news clippings, articles about a missing boy from Ohio, a boy named Daniel Brooks. And the picture in those articles was him. There was no denying it. That was his face, his real name, his real mother's tearful plea for information. Daniel confronted Carol. She broke down. She admitted everything. She cried and begged him to understand. She said she'd been out of her mind with grief. She said she loved him like her own son. She said if he went back to Ohio now, after all these years, they'd both go to prison. She said his real mother had probably moved on, probably assumed he was dead, probably wouldn't even want him back. She made him promise not to tell anyone. And Daniel, now 16 and terrified and confused, agreed. He didn't know what else to do. He'd lived with Carol for 7 years. She was the only consistent parent figure he'd had. His real mother was a fading memory. He finished high school. He got a part-time job at a grocery store. He dated a girl from his class. He tried to live a normal life while carrying this impossible secret. But in October 2023, when Daniel was 26 years old, Carol died. A sudden heart attack. She was 61 years old, and Daniel found himself completely alone. He went through her belongings. He found more newspaper clippings. He found letters she'd written but never sent to his real mother, letters apologizing, letters trying to explain. He found photos of himself as a child that she'd kept hidden, and he made a decision. He would find out who he really was. He would go back to Ohio. He would find his real family if they were still there. Daniel didn't go to the police immediately. He was terrified. He thought he might be in trouble for not coming forward sooner. He thought his mother might be dead or might not want to see him. So he did something simpler. He went to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get an Ohio driver's license. He was moving back to Ohio, back to Riverside. He'd found his old address online. He wanted to drive past his childhood home. He filled out the application using his real name, Daniel Brooks, born August 3rd, 1997. And when the clerk typed his information into the system, everything lit up red. The clerk was a woman named Patricia Morrison. She'd worked at the DMV for 23 years. She'd processed thousands of licenses, but she'd never seen a missing persons flag quite like this before. The system was screaming at her that this person had been missing since 2006, that there was an active case file, that she needed to contact law enforcement immediately. Patricia looked at the young man standing in front of her. He looked nervous, but not suspicious. He looked like any other 26-year-old getting a driver's license. She asked him to wait one moment. She stepped into the back office and called the police. Within 20 minutes, 2 Riverside Police Department detectives arrived at the DMV. They approached Daniel carefully. They asked if they could speak with him. Daniel's hands were shaking. This was it. This was the moment he'd been dreading. But he nodded. He followed them to a private room, and he told them everything. He told them about Carol Henderson, about the farmhouse in Pennsylvania, about the 17 years he'd spent living under a different name, about finding the newspaper clippings, about Carol's death, about deciding to come home. The detectives listened in complete shock. They'd worked missing persons cases before. They'd never had one resolved like this, never had a victim walk through the door 17 years later, alive and well. They contacted Jennifer Brooks. She was 53 years old now. She still lived in Riverside, though she'd moved to a different house years ago. Emily was 23, graduated from college, working as a teacher. Jennifer had never remarried. She'd never stopped hoping, even when everyone else told her to move on. When the detective called and told her they'd found Daniel, that he was alive, she didn't believe it at first. She thought it was a cruel prank. She demanded proof. They sent her a photo, and she knew. She knew from his eyes. Those were her son's eyes. That was her baby. She drove to the police station, breaking every speed limit. She ran through the front doors, and when she saw Daniel standing there, taller than her now, a grown man with a beard and lines around his eyes, she collapsed. Just dropped to her knees, sobbing. Daniel caught her, and for the first time in 17 years, Jennifer Brooks held her son. The story exploded across national news. Missing boy found alive after 17 years. The case that stumped investigators solved by a routine DMV transaction. Networks wanted interviews. Talk shows wanted them as guests. But Jennifer and Daniel declined almost everything. They needed time. Time to reconnect. Time to process. Time to figure out how to be a family again. Emily met her brother for the first time as an adult. She'd been 6 when he disappeared. She barely remembered him. Now she was 23, meeting her 26-year-old brother. It was awkward and emotional and overwhelming. The legal questions were complicated. Technically, Daniel had done nothing wrong. He'd been a child when he was abducted. He'd been manipulated and lied to. Carol Henderson would have faced kidnapping charges, but she was dead. The Pennsylvania authorities investigated. They confirmed everything Daniel had told police. They found the farmhouse. They found the forged documents. They found the evidence. But there was no one to prosecute. No justice to be served. Just a tragic story of grief turned into crime, and a boy who'd lost 17 years of his life. Daniel struggled with the transition. He'd spent more than half his life as Matthew Henderson. Becoming Daniel Brooks again wasn't simple. He had to relearn who he was. He had therapy twice a week. He had nightmares. He had anger he didn't know how to process. Jennifer was patient. She'd waited 17 years. She could wait longer. She told him there was no rush, no pressure. They had the rest of their lives to figure it out. Emily helped too. She introduced him to her friends. She taught him about social media and smartphones and all the technology that had changed while he was isolated. She took him to movies and concerts. She helped him feel normal. A year has passed since Daniel walked into that DMV. He's 27 now. He lives in an apartment near his mother's house. He has a job working in construction. He's taking community college classes. He's dating. He's building a life. He still sees a therapist. He still has hard days where he wonders who he would have been if Carol Henderson had driven past him that day in 2006. But he's here. He's alive. He's found his family. And Jennifer Brooks finally got to stop lighting birthday candles for a son she thought was dead. The case is closed now, officially solved. but it leaves so many questions. How many other children out there are living under different names with people who aren't their real families, not knowing who they really are? How do you rebuild a relationship with a child who's now an adult, who you've missed every milestone for, who's essentially a stranger? How do you forgive yourself for saying yes when your child asked to ride his bike 4 blocks? Jennifer doesn't have answers to all of those, but she has her son, and for now, that's enough. If this story moved you, if you made it all the way to the end, then I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel right now, like this video, share it with someone who loves true crime, and drop a comment telling me what you think about Daniel's story. Would you have been able to forgive Carol Henderson if she had lived? Do you think Daniel should have tried to escape sooner? Let me know your thoughts, and remember to hit that notification bell because we cover cases like this every single week. Stories that will shock you, stories that will stay with you long after the video ends. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about Daniel Brooks, and I'll see you in the next one.